Hello.
Hi, this is Kai from ImperiumA.net calling.
Hi, it's Blackie.
Hey, Blackie, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Nice. As I understand, I got 15 minutes to ask you, 20 years worth of questions.
Well, we can go a little longer on that.
Great. I'm a grown man, nervous about speaking to another grown man. That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy, and then you shouldn't be like that. You know, as I've gotten older and my career has moved, into where it is now, you learn that regardless, well, let me tell you a story.
Okay.
We finished the first album, and we're on tour, and this girl comes up to me after a show one day, and she goes, "I want to thank you for saving my life." And I said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "Yeah." She says, I was hooked on heroin really bad. And you had a song on your first album called B.A.D. And it made me understand how devastating what I was doing to myself. And I just wanted to tell you that had it not been for that song, that I'd be dead by now. Now, she walks away and I'm scratching my head because B.A.D. got nothing to do with heroin.
Yeah.
And it took me years to understand the correlation between the two, because the first thing that popped into my head was that was the very first time I had ever had anyone place that R word on me, which was responsibility, and here I was just trying to get in a band and get up on stage and sing our little songs, and then it turned into all of that, and I don't want that label placed on me.
Right.
I'm just trying to be me.
Yeah.
But, over the years, I started to understand that whatever she heard, and this is the interpretation of art now, because what one person sees or hears may not have anything to do with what the person who created it intended.
Right.
Doesn't matter. That's the beauty of art.
Yeah.
They see or hear what they want, and their interpretation of it is unique, and so therefore can be used to maybe do something positive. Well, a few years goes by, and these stories are starting to mount up. And, over a period of time, I just started to really, embrace is not the word, I guess accept was more, or reconcile, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That, okay, this is what it is, whether you like it or not. It's funny, too, because I was talking about this just a couple of weeks ago, that when I decided that I wanted to do this for real, I was in my teens, and like everybody else, you think, oh, you want to be famous.
Yeah.
But I had no concept of what fame was. The only concept I had was my concept of fame.
Sure.
And it was extremely rigid and limited as to what I thought the whole thing would be about, because to me, fame was more like a smorgasbord of what I wanted.
Yeah.
And what I wanted two things. I wanted to be respected, and I wanted to be admired for the work that I was doing. But I did not want to be loved. I did not want responsibility. I didn't want the demands of all that stuff. Totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
Just totally, naive, if you like, or short-sighted, but whatever it is, my whole concept of it was totally skewed.
Did it scare you when you realized what you...
No, because I just realized it just recently, that was my problem,
Okay.
But, I'm going around, through my career bumping into walls, trying to figure out how things were working, and I knew I was different.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's better or worse. My brain just worked differently when it came to the things that I thought was, especially things that had to do with me. Now, looking back on it now, there was probably a huge degree of denial because I wanted what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I didn't want those things that I didn't want that went along with it. It was baggage that went with it. But I didn't want that baggage.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you put on, like, what's it called, the word for it when the horses got the things that don't look to the sides, you know?
Oh, yeah, the blinders.
Yeah. Did you kind of...
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because you just turn it off in your head.
Yeah.
You know, and you say, you know, I'm just going to do my thing and whatever. I can't control anybody else, and you can't.
Yeah.
You know, and whatever happens, happens. But we had done 3 albums, and when we got finished with the Circus record, we came over here to Europe, and us and Maiden did this really big tour together. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that we were, you know, we spent 3 months together just in this one tour alone. And, I mean, we were managed by the same people, you know, so for 3 years, we spent a lot of time together, living in and out of each other's suitcases, you know, on tour. But that tour, that fall was really interesting because we both discovered that neither one of us liked the records we had just made. And, you know, so at night, you know, we're on each other's buses going from town to town. You know, some nights, you know, I'd go over on one of their buses or one of them had come over on our bus. And, you know, you just talk, you know. And what we discovered was that we had all been on the road a really long time for like 3 years. And what happens over that period of time is you do a record and a tour and a record and a tour and a record and a tour. Pretty soon you don't know who you are anymore. Yeah. And that's dangerous for an artist because when you don't write about who you are, then it starts to become manufactured and artificial. Yeah. And you're in a process at that point. You're not writing or, you know, trying to convey anything that's real. So, you know, that gets done. We come back to America. We finish the tour. And I remember we were playing in some arena in Toledo, Ohio. And we were getting ready to go on, and I'm looking in the mirror, putting on my makeup, and I can see everybody behind me in the dressing room, you know, and they're getting all jacked up and ready to go. You can hear the people, you know, stomping their feet on the floor. I said, the arena's shaking, you know, because they're anticipating what's getting ready to happen. And I'm looking at all this chaos in the mirror behind me, and I just turned around and I said to everybody, I go, are we going to continue on like this thing we've created? It's a circus environment, you know, and I wasn't talking about the record. I meant just general day-to-day life. Yeah. Or are we going to do something of true musical merit? And boy, you could see the blood drain out of people's faces when I said that, because it's like, here we are, you know, we finally arrived to where we want to be, and now the boy's blowing a gasket. Yeah. You know? But it was true because, and I said all that to say this, because when I went away after that record, you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time by myself, several months, just contemplating what I was going to do. And a funny thing had happened in that time. I was in New York, and I had done an interview with Hit Parader magazine, and I was tired, and I was no longer interested in trying to put on a facade or be Mr. Show Business or anything like that. I was tired of it, you know, right? So in this interview, I talked about politics and religion and all kinds of stuff that I'd never talked about before. And I was just letting, you know, oddly enough, the real me come out, which we would eventually do on that record. And, you know, I thought that was more metaphorical than anything because it wasn't planned, but it just kind of, like I said, it was kind of an overview of what was really going on inside me. And I didn't care how people were going to react to that interview. I just could have cared less. And so, a couple months go by and the tour's over, and I moved into a new house out in L.A. and stuff, and I wasn't there a week, and I got this big box full of mail from Hit Parader they'd sent me about fan mail they'd gotten about that article that I'd done. So I thought, well, I'll look at a couple of them. It's probably hate mail, people are like, what's wrong with this guy? And I read letter after letter after letter, and they all said the same thing. What took you so long to come to this? The fans they had seen through it all along. Yeah. They said, we knew you were like this. What took you so long to say this? I looked at those letters, and I sit there on the couch, and I stared at them for a while, and I thought, now, there was a convergence happening because I'm already going in that direction. But you know what happens when you're thinking, you've been thinking something for a long time, and somebody comes up and says to you what you've been thinking for a while, it further deepens the idea in your head, it reinforces it, and you go, that's it. Yeah. This is the line in the sand. This is where I'm going, and I ain't looking back. And that's really what happened. So, again, I'm saying all that to say that the whole concept of the responsibility that went with it, I started to change what I thought. I still wasn't completely ready to accept that because I understood that no matter what I do in my life, you can't be responsible for everybody. But there was also there was other things that were happening to me at the time. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, I think the idea of me returning to my faith was starting to crop up because if you look at Headless, if you look at the opening line of the title song, Father, come save us from this madness, we're under God of creation, are we blind? I dreamt that. I dreamt the song.
Really?
And I just, I've dreamt a bunch of songs. I hold on to my heart on this record, and, but it's not uncommon. A lot of songwriters do that. And, so, I was dreaming it, and I jumped up and immediately went in the studio and put it down real quick, and looked back at it. But it wasn't like a conscious thought. I just wrote what I was dreaming. Looking back on it, I understand that, it was a conscious thought. It was just rattling around inside my head. Yeah. So, all that stuff was really, I wouldn't say it was the beginnings of a journey. It's all been a journey to get me to where I am now, but to answer, I've given you an elaborate answer to your original statement, but to answer your question in short, yes, I have begun to understand it because, like, an interesting thing has happened on this tour, because night after night, I will watch people. It's funny, my wife and I, we were listening to some stuff last night after the show. We were on the bus, and we were listening to some music that was really moving me, literally to tears. And I said to my wife, I said, it's so funny. I said, just a couple hours ago, I'm in a room, and I'm watching people literally with tears coming down their faces, screaming the lyrics of these songs that are moving them, and now I'm having someone else do the same thing to me. And it's so, the power of music, when it's done correctly, is this amazing thing when it's done right. We don't always get it right, but you strive for it and hope that you can. And in the process, you hope that you say something, that can be of benefit to somebody. That's, if you're given a gift to communicate, and when I say gift, I don't necessarily mean songwriting or talent to sing or play an instrument. It's to communicate, really, because that's what all those things are. Yeah. And if you've been given a talent to communicate, and then even more so, a platform to communicate from, then it seems to me, there was a very famous quote from a guy, I don't know, 150 years old. His name was Horace Mann. He was a politician in America. He goes, what a tragedy it would be to die and not gain some victory for mankind. And I thought, how true, how true. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. Not as much as I would like, but occasionally when something happens, when it's the right stuff, yeah, it can be really moving me. Music is multidimensional because, when it's done with lyrics, I mean, not all music is, but when it's done with lyrics, you can tap into some heavy emotions with it, especially if, one of the things I thought that always did pretty good was lyrics. When you start to understand word value, and the value of words, and, what's the old thing Mark Twain used to say, the difference between the right word and the wrong word is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. They sound similar but vastly different. So what is it that you're trying to convey, and can you tap into that? And that's one of the things I always thought, that was, if there was any gift that I had, it was probably that. No, I see it as a blessing now.
It's a positive.
Yeah, because I understand that it's what I've been chosen to do.
Yeah.
So all that stuff I ran from early on, I now embrace. Well, okay. Now I'm gonna have to get a little deep with you now.
Okay,
For you to understand this, because if it's me, just me being myself, yeah. You're absolutely right. That would be, a heavy weight to carry around.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel at this point in my life, I tell people now, I'm not making records for me. I'm making records for God.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm his representative now.
Mm-hmm.
So any of that stuff that, people say to me, like what you're talking about now, I just puts a smile on my face. So I'm not bearing that weight anymore. That's his responsibility. I'm just doing what I'm told to do. Yeah. Hey, and I, as best I can, get it.
Yeah.
Because, I think, for better or for worse, we're all going to go through tough times one place or another, and if there's something that helps you out of it, and I'm not saying, that anything I've been through is anything to the degree that you've been through, but whatever it may be, you're going to want to say thank you. But again, I don't reject or accept really either one of those, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sound cruel. I just feel that I've been given a job to do now, and I'm representing my God, and that's his thing to accept. There was a 20-year period I was running, and I mean I was running. Because I didn't want to know about any of this. I got people coming up to me telling me the same story you're telling me. I'm running from this like it's the plague.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it, man. I felt that this calling was being laid on me, and I didn't want it.
Yeah.
And so as time went on, I basically said, all right, God, it's time for a showdown. It's you and me right now. We're going to fight this out. So what I did is I spent about 20 years, and I really kind of went into investigative reporting, where I had to know the truth. And I came from a perspective of extreme prejudice, where I wasn't even trying to be fair. I was coming, like I said, from a point of view or a perspective of I am trying to disprove this.
Yeah, you came prepared for that fight.
Oh yeah, I came to pick a fight.
Yeah.
So, and the more I started reading, I'd read things and I couldn't repudiate it. And so I thought, well, okay, then I'll move on to the next thing. So at the end of 20 years, I come to the conclusion one day I was not mad at God. I was mad at man because of the indoctrination that I had received.
Right.
And once I came to that revelation, it's just like a big weight was lifted off of me. And then that studying that I was doing was then able to be done without that veil of prejudice. You know, so I then started looking at things. Well, I'll give you an example. You look at the totality of the Bible, it's 66 books written by 40 different authors, spread over about a 2,500-year period, written in 3 different continents. These guys had, very few of them had any knowledge of each other, and most of them were, you know, lived and died in places that were totally remote from each other, but yet at the same time they're all saying the same thing when you look at their writings. And I looked at that and I said, how can this be?
Yeah.
I mean, I studied the occult for 3 years.
Yes.
I looked at Nostradamus' writings and all those other so-called prophets, you know, and they were all phony. You know, so I thought, well, you know, any prophecy that's in the Bible is the same thing. Wrong. I started seeing things that I could not explain, and it was absolutely supernatural. And one day I was reading, and it hit me. My God, I'm reading the living word of the living God.
Yeah.
And when I came to that conclusion, I started seeing everything totally different. Well, it was for kids, really, because I would get asked one question more than any. They would say, hey, man, give me some advice. How do I get from where I am to where you are?
Yeah.
And so I would tell them, you know, how difficult this business was, and they didn't hear a word I was saying. They were just like, yeah. You know, it's like it was going through one ear and out the other. Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, I'll tell them a story that shows them the worst possible side of this business. Yeah. And then after they've heard it, if they still think they want to go for it, then, hey, have at it. You know, you've been warned. You know, and it's like, you know, there's what's the old Hunter, what's the guy who did Fear and Loathing in Vegas?
Oh, Johnny Depp, the Hunter.
Yeah. Well, his famous quote about the music business, you know, it's a plastic hallway full of slimy vermin and then there's a dark side too. You know, it's like, you know, so, you know, Hunter Thompson. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. You know, and that's really what it is. But you know, I think, to be honest, looking back, I still didn't succeed with that as far as trying to get that point across. What made the Crimson Idol as successful as it was a far more simple story than I gave it credit for. Because on the surface, it's a story of a boy looking for love. Yeah. Well, that was the germination of the idea, but I thought, okay, I'll make it a little more complicated so, you know, there's depth to it. Yes. You know, and I think, you know, for the average person, they may or may not even see that. You know, they're looking at, you know, the beauty of the simplicity of the story. If you want to see deeper into it, you certainly can. But I think that that's really what got people going originally. And if I would have, when I wrote that, I did not anticipate that. So for better or worse, I'd like to take full credit, you know, for telling you, you know, I mastermind the thing, but I really can't. You know, it's one of those things that's kind of a happy accident. Yeah, but, you know, what's the reality? What's real life?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I stood on a fence for weeks over that ending, and, you know, I knew the idea that I had, and I knew the symbolism of it. Yeah. And I thought metaphorically, honestly, I thought it was one of the best things I'd ever come up with. I thought, this is Shakespeare. Yeah, it really is. And so, but I knew the direction that the band had been going in with Headless, and I thought I'm still suffering somewhat from that old image.
Yeah.
You know, is this going to be seen as a cheap play on theatrics if I do something like this? And so, like I said, I was on the fence as to whether to do it. I knew from, a pure writing perspective that it was just, I'm not saying it because I did it, it's just you ain't going to get better than that, and I knew it was that good. But I was still afraid, and so I called up Rod one day, and I told him the idea. I told him, I says, and this kid, he's on stage, he takes the strings off the guitar, makes a noose, and hangs. Rod screamed on the other end of the phone. And I thought, this is either really good or really bad, one or the other. And after he stopped screaming, he says, this is genius. You have to do this.
Right.
And that was the push I needed. So, and I know Rod really well. And it's like, to elicit that kind of reaction from him, I says, okay, I got one here. And so, and again, never look back. I've not seen that one. I've seen others that it was top 20, but not top 10. Sure. I agree because I had the idea for the Idol. I was sitting in a restaurant in London in '86, just before we started the tour with Maiden.
Okay.
And it wasn't fleshed out or anything. It was just literally a rough idea.
Yeah.
And I worked on that thing in my head for a couple of years before it ever really came to any real fruition. So Headless happened in the meantime. But I've often looked back at it and I thought, well, it was, this is fate because, I would like to take credit for telling you, yes, Headless had to set up the Idol, which it did, but it wasn't because I designed it that way. It ended up being a natural progression. I think of it in a lot of ways as the way Revolver set up Sgt. Pepper. Without Revolver, you have no Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
You need that bridge to get you from point A to point B.
Yeah, what a great comparison.
And, and so in that sense, there's a lot of similarities. Well, you see the germinations of it there, yeah. Just the soundtrack to get out the movie. It's really, you need continuity from where it came.
Yeah.
So, it seemed simple, but it still led you to believe that it had something to do with the original. Yes.
Okay.
Very different. My first thought, and you would think I would know better than this, but my first thought was that it was going to be easier to do because I had often been asked this question: if you had to make that record over again, how long do you think it would take to do it? And my initial gut reaction always was 6 months.
Okay.
Because it took 2 years to do it the first time.
Yeah.
But knowing what I know now, it's like, okay, it won't be near as hard.
Yeah.
Even that I underestimated. In reality, it should have taken a year and a half.
Really?
Now, yeah, the layer upon layer upon layer to get it right.
Yeah.
To make it sound the way that it did, really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And the first thing I noticed, I went in the studio and I took the original 24-track tapes, and I hadn't listened to them since we mixed them, and that'd been 20-plus years. And so the first thing that hit me the very first night was that it didn't matter what song it was, whenever I put on a tape, I could take 6 tracks, say like a snare drum, a tom, a bass guitar, a rhythm guitar, and a keyboard.
Yeah.
Put those tracks up, and don't listen to anything else. Just listen to those tracks.
Yeah.
There was this thing, and I call it a thing. I don't know what it was. It was a vibe that those tracks had. Take those tracks down, put up 6 more. And that vibe was still there. Take those down, put up 6 more, still there. Take that song off, repeat the process again, put up 6 tracks. It was like somebody had taken some sort of, I don't know, like some sort of something and poured it all over those tapes.
Yeah.
And the tapes were just inundated with that vibe. Now, I'm sure a lot of it was the original studio it was recorded in, which doesn't exist anymore because there was an earthquake and the building got really damaged and it's gone now. But
the Fort Apache studio?
Yeah, the original Fort Apache's gone now.
Oh, really?
You know, so yeah. So I mean, I've since moved it, out to where I am now. But the original studio it was quite a historical studio. I mean, the Beatles had worked in there. I mean, a lot of people, and but there was a big quake in '94, and one of the walls just literally collapsed on one side of it, and it had to be torn down. But at any rate, there was part of it was that room, but I'm also convinced that a lot of it was the mood that I was in at the time, the people that were playing on it, the engineers that were. It was just a total. The totality of it all is, help put that sound, that stamp that was on all those tracks. And that was the thing that intimidated me the most, because I thought, no matter how, trying to recreate that, we got really close on this. Okay. We got maybe 90-95% on each track. But the problem is that when you've got maybe 40 tracks on a song, if you're 5% off on each one of them when you go to mix, you're then really a long way off. Yeah. And so it wasn't really until we started mixing, and Logan Mader mixed it, and he got 4 mixes into it, and it still wasn't right. Okay. And he took the Idol for the 5th mix, and that's where he found it. And when he did, it ended up sounding like a movie soundtrack. Right. It didn't sound like the original record. The original record has a thing all of its own. Yeah. And I can't tell you what it is. I don't know. It's as good. I mean, I've obviously had a chance to live with both of them now for a while. Yeah. One is not better than the other. No. But they are different. Yeah, exactly. But what Logan did when he came up with that, like I said, he had to get 5 mixes into it to find it. Yeah. And when he did, I told him, I said, this sounds like a movie soundtrack. Now, it's bigger. The orchestration is bigger, which lends it more to that movie thing. And I thought, what, this is perfect. And this is another one of those things that I would love to tell people that we had it designed like that from the beginning, but it wasn't. It just, you stumble into it, Yeah, well, you're looking for something, but you don't know what you're looking for. It's kind of like, you go into a shop and somebody says, can I help you? And you go, well, no, I'll know when I find it,
I think you're selling yourself a little bit short here, but okay.
Well, maybe, but, I'm being as honest as I think I can be, because, again, you try to put the building blocks in place. But like any other painter, he paints a stroke or two and he stands back and he looks at it, goes back and puts another couple of colors in, and it eventually it will start to reveal itself. Yeah. But there's a difference between the thing revealing itself and it being finished. Exactly. The finish was what was not there yet. And that I can tell you from experience, mixes make or break records. I don't care how great those tracks are. Yeah. If they're not put together right, you got nothing. Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing that came to my head was when we were finished with this, yes, I was happy with it.
Yeah.
What I'm not, and you're going to find this probably sacrilege, when we took those tapes in the first night and started listening, the original tapes, Doodah was with me, and the one thing that both of us kept saying to each other, I never heard that.
Oh.
I never heard that instrument.
Really?
Well, how come that? And it was everywhere. There was so many little things that I forgot that we had done that people never heard. And I sit there after, we were there probably 4 or 5 hours doing that. And I had this kind of sick feeling in my stomach after we finished for the evening, and I thought, as good as that record was, and as good as those mixes were, there's so much stuff that's on these tapes that the world never heard.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it wasn't on the album. It was on the different mixes and stuff.
Yeah, because the mixes, some of the stuff got lost in the mixes.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as good as those records, that record was, the original mixes, there's stuff that was missing on it. One day, maybe I'd like to remix that again.
Okay.
I don't know contractually if we would be allowed to, but, there's stuff on it that, like I said, that the world never heard that could be very cool. Well, that record, we were trying to get into some of the ear candy stuff, that where it was designed to be like that. And then when I really accelerated that process was getting into Headless and certainly the Idol, that they were all designed to be things that when you went back and you listened years later, you'd hear things you never heard before.
Oh, really? It was on purpose?
Well, yeah, because, some of that stuff, it's, you get hit with a big picture initially, and you start to form a listening pattern in your head. Everybody does this. I do it. We all do it. And then, you'll hear something on a different pair of speakers one day, that lets certain frequencies pop out, and you go, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it had
well, it's all there. It's just you just weren't hearing it, But with those original tapes, like I said, there was things missing on that that just didn't make it into the mix because there was no room for it. You'd have to ask the man that gave it to me. Nope. I don't abuse it. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, I don't know if you know or not, but in '83 I had a serious accident where I blew out that whole left side.
Right.
More than anything, that taught me how to maintenance, and to stretch and to warm up and things like that. And that's probably, you talk about a blessing in disguise. I mean, it was terrifying when it happened. But, because they told me, and they said, well, you may never sing again, and if you do, you'll never be the same. Okay. And, so refusing to believe that, what you do is you go back and you start working at it, and you learn to do things in a different way.
Yeah.
And, the doctor that I had, he took a very simple approach. He goes, you're watching the Olympics and you're watching those sprinters on the side. Yeah. What are they doing before the actual gun goes off? They're over there stretching. Yeah. Do you stretch before you start singing? I go, no. And he just looked at me, duh. It's like, okay, well, it makes sense. Maybe I should start doing that,
Yeah. So it's a warm-up procedure you have before every show?
Yeah, I do it before the shows, and, I also do it in the studio. I just, I'm not going to just start running, I get in there and stretch first and get it loose. And like I said, because of that, it just taught me that I could do things that I could have never done before. So, again, it's a blessing in disguise. Funny thing, though, we were doing this record. There was probably 100 times when I was in the studio, I said, we're going to, instead of calling this Re-Idolize, we're just going to call it What's the Point? Because when I would do the vocal tracks, it sounded exactly the same as it had 25 years ago. And I said, well, why am I even doing this,
Why am I here?
Well, but you would think after 25 years it would have changed somewhat.
Yeah.
But what I did do on this one, I thought, you know what? I've had 25 years to live with this character now.
Yeah.
I can afford to do some things that maybe I didn't do the first time. So I acted a little more on this one than I did. So if you go back and you listen to some of the real dramatic parts where, the character has room to really express himself, you'll hear me doing things where I'm letting my voice crack and things like that. And I'm doing it on purpose,
Love that.
for the effect.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, if I sang it straight out, note for note, the way it was before, you wouldn't have been able to tell any difference.
Okay.
It took about 3.5 years to get it back, but it's fine now. Well, because earlier in the year I've had 4 shoulder surgeries because all those lifting weights over the years and stuff just wore them out,
Yeah.
And I had another one December 30th of last year, so I had a few months where I was down, but after that, I went in and I started training pretty heavy and really got ready for this, which I wasn't able to do, after that break, because that break was so devastating. I've broken a lot of stuff in my life playing different sports and stuff, but never experienced anything like that. That was just catastrophic. I got a guy that is a physical therapist back in California that he works on the U.S. Olympic teams. And after, I come back from a tour and you got stuff, that's, tweaked and what have you. He always throws me up on a table and puts me back together, which he's going to do in about 2 weeks as well. But he told me, he says, we didn't want to say anything to you after that break. He said, because most people, when they go through something like this, it's career ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says, but we just wanted to see how you were going to react. It's like, I think more than anything, you got to have good people putting you back together, but you also have to have the willpower to go in, to go through that therapy and all that stuff. It's not fun. Well, I would be if we would have had more time to prepare.
Right.
Because from the time we started this to the time we left to start the tour, it was an insane breakneck pace.
Okay.
And again, like the first album, far more work than I anticipated. But the film was the thing that really did it, because I don't make movies. I'm not a movie guy. And I'd never done anything like this before. And at one point, I got 5 different guys working around the world, that I'm having to juggle to get them all on the same page together to get this thing to come out the way I want it. And like I said, I've never done this before. I really needed a couple of assistants that I discovered later that I needed, but never having done it, these are all things you learn as you go into it. So to say that by the time we got to Gothenburg for the first show, I was burnt out already. I mean, I was totally fried. Well, and it got better after that. I mean, actually, the next night, everything was like we'd been doing it for a year already. It was come off without a hitch. But, that's opening night stuff. It's always going to happen. But like I said, I found myself on stage a number of times throughout this tour feeling a little resentful and a little sorry for myself, thinking, I wish I could have enjoyed this more.
Okay.
But I was so fried before I started, it wasn't even fair. Oh, no. I mean, I made a statement a couple of nights ago in Oberhausen that...
This is my question. Can I ask it?
Sure.
Not to be rude or anything, but you made an announcement that you're doing this tour and then no more tour with this incarnation of the band, and I'm watching like every word. So I'm thinking, okay, something's up here. And
well, Mike said the same thing to me afterwards. He says, did you word that properly? And I said, well, what I thought I said was, with this record, with this incarnation.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting thing had happened earlier in the day. I was doing an interview, and I said the same thing to the guy, and I saw the funny look on his face. He goes, so that's it?
Yeah.
He says, no more band? And I said, no, that's not what I said.
No.
Now, our lighting tech after the show, came onto the bus, and he says, are we all fired? You know? And I said, no, guys, that's not what I said. And I realized later what happens when you start using that kind of language. People aren't hearing what you're saying. They're hearing what they think you're saying. And we're gonna have to make an announcement and make it official. What I meant is that it took so long to put this thing together that we had no intention of really just doing it for 10 weeks and that would be it. But we're going to take this thing out next, we're going to continue it on. Actually, we're going to expand it a little bit. We're doing all the songs off the new record, and, we'll enhance the movie a little bit and things like that. So when we come back next year, you'll see a little bit different version of it. But once that is finished, unless it's some sort of a charity situation, we will never play this record again.
Okay.
And I thought I was very clear about that, but apparently I wasn't, so I'm going to have to make a statement. But if you notice, I also followed up the statement and said, it's safe to say there will be no 35th reunion of this record. I was talking about the record.
Yeah.
Because my point is that you cannot keep playing this record forever. There has to come a time where we say, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
And effectively what I'm doing at that point is telling people, if you want to see it, you better see it now, because after it's done, there won't be any more.
Yeah.
Unless it's an unusual situation, like I said, for a one-off charity event or something like that. Got a little strange. It really did. It was like, because we went into Somebody, the next song, and it took about halfway through that song before we got them back again. And that never happens. I mean, they just, once that song starts, they're in it from the get-go. And I told the guys when we came off stage, I says, something's not right. I said, did I? And then that's when Mike said what he said to me. He goes, I'm standing on the side, and he says, I'm listening to you, and I'm going, did something happen I don't know about? Well, that too was unintentional, so like I said, we're going to have to clear that up.
Good. Just a couple of fan questions, if you have the time. Take 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure.
Speed questions. I got them from some fans here.
Nope. No, but I'm collecting other stuff.
Okay. This is a weird one. Did you figure out what women do to the amount of toilet paper? I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
Have you gotten to the bottom of that?
Only what they tell me. Good question. I wish I knew the answer. I don't believe so. Time will tell. Well, listen, that was moving, the story that you told me initially, and I'm glad that in whatever way, I was able to help. But, it's tough to listen, when you hear somebody go through something like that, and especially when it pushes them to the point of that sort of contemplation. I'm sure we will. All right, sir, you take care of yourself now.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.